Oh, good afternoon.
Hello everybody.
Yeah.
I say that every week. I looked at my YouTube ones and I thought, I know exactly what I'm going to say every week. Hello everybody. It's 2:30 and it's the infant feeding team. And here we are again on level 7 at the John Radcliffe Hospital with the infant feeding team. I'm Naomi, this is Alex, and we look after mums and babies that are breastfeeding. So, or bottle feeding, and it doesn't matter where they are in the hospital, we look after them. So if you're coming into hospital and you've got questions and things, we sometimes come along and see if you're in the surgical wards or in A&E. We sometimes see you, we don't always, because you're often coming back to the ward to see us, and sometimes if we've got time we'll come over to the children's, but we don't do that very often either. But we do get lots of telephone calls and things about babies and mums in the hospital. So we see lots of different things, but normally it's babies up to about 6 weeks old we look after. But we're really happy in this session to talk about babies of any age.
Yep.
Anyone that's feeding their baby.
Regardless of method of feeding.
Absolutely. We are infant feeding, not breastfeeding midwives, so we support everybody that's feeding their babies. And so whatever your questions, we would love you to ask them. And we always get really amazing questions so that people that are thinking it would see them as well. So, you know, if you think it's a silly question, somebody else will be thinking it's a silly question too, but somebody will ask it. And so don't be afraid to ask silly questions, because we really like silly questions, because they're the most sensible questions, really, the ones that most people are thinking about.
I think just one thing just to clarify that Naomi's just mentioned, that we see many of you. We'll actually see you if you're having a particular problem. So all our staff are trained to do day-to-day breastfeeding support. Our midwives go through BFI, baby friendly, accredited universities. So they all have fabulous training. So if you don't see us, then actually see it's a good thing, it's a bonus, because if you do see us, the likelihood is that things are not going as straightforwardly as you would hope. So, you know, we tend to get brought in when things are a little bit more complicated. So anybody who's out there come in with the intention of not seeing us, really. And but
we hope you don't.
Yeah, for all the right reasons, we hope we don't. But
yeah, because you know, I think the expectation is that you can have somebody just come along ask to see us, but actually we're very thin on the ground, really, and so we have to be quite selective in the most appropriate people that we see. So if you're early days and your baby's not attaching, it's very frustrating for you as mums that your baby's not attaching, but there's lots of reasons why babies don't attach. Sometimes it's because you've had pain relief in labour and your baby's quite sleepy still, and you've had a long labour and you're quite sleepy, and so you know, coming together is a bit slower in the first sort of 24 to 48 hours. So sometimes babies don't feel very hungry because they've got tummies full of yuck, and they just don't feel hungry because the baby's time. I've got to get my little marbles out because I have to do that every week, don't I? But babies' tummies are tiny, and so you know, if they get a little bit of mucus in them, which they all get, then they I'm trying to find them. They've disappeared.
yeah, they're there. Nope. Well, they just fit. Oh, in there somewhere.
I'll find them. Anyway, so if they've got tiny little tummies and you've got little bits of mucus inside your tummy, your baby's tummy, they're not going to feel hungry, so they don't wake up and feed. So
shall I look and you?
Yeah, I'll talk.
You can talk.
So if their tummies are you know, really full of mucus from the birth, they just have to wait to bring it up, and most babies start to be a bit sick about 12 hours after they're born. And
we've got one missing.
They get a bit mucusy. Well, it was there the other day.
Yeah, it'll be in here somewhere.
So if you imagine it's the size of a marble, so here you go, this is your baby's tummy the day it's born, and if you imagine how much gunk and mucus you have when you give birth, all the liquor and everything that goes on, and they, you know, they do swallow little bits of stuff. It's just normal stuff, you know, and so their tummies are a bit full sometimes. So what we want you to do is give small tiny amounts, you know, in a syringe. Have we got a syringe there as well?
I'll find one.
Our prop box is a real mess. We need to sort ourselves out.
We tidy up.
So if Alex will show you that it's tiny amounts, and if you see how small those 1 ml syringes are, they have tiny amounts, and that goes into that tiny little syringe. But if you give little bits of colostrum, it's a laxative, so it pushes everything through their tummies. It gets rid of everything in their tummy, and once they've got rid of that, then they start to wake up and want to feed. So this is why we talk about early protection of your milk supply by hand expressing and giving lots of colostrum. and keeping it normal. So you shouldn't need to see us for that. Because your baby is behaving normally, so their tummy gets a little bit bigger after 3 or 4 days, and then once it's over 10-15 days it becomes much bigger, but that's still tiny volumes.
This is to back it up.
You can see that from here. We're quite a long way from you
today,
aren't we?
Yeah, so on that picture you can see that the cherry is the furthest over here. So this is the cherry the size of a newborn baby's tummy, or the small marble, and then we move on to a walnut. And then we're on to an apricot, and then we're on to an egg. And we're talking about changes from newborn to 3 days to 1 week to a month. So, and the milk changes in that period of time. So we're talking about, at this stage, really concentrated colostrum, a food in concentrate, a laxative to get rid of all that meconium. And then in line with the maternal milk volume increases, as the mother goes into transitional and then mature milk, we're getting much bigger volumes between 3 to 5 days, and this is this period of time here, and that's where the volumes need to increase. And what we always do when we have clinic, because we run clinic before we do these sessions, is we ask the mums, what do you think we should cover? Because many of the mums have listened. And the mum I had this morning, a lovely mummy this morning with her baby Henry, and she said to talk about milk volumes and the fact that once you're beyond colostrum, you shouldn't be giving it with a syringe. And I know we've mentioned it before, but it's always worth reiterating. So if you are at home and you're hand expressing and your baby is day 2 or 3, then that's okay. But once your milk starts to change and you're getting more of it, it's lighter in colour, it's thinner in consistency, then you should be going to a different way of giving the milk. It could be a cup, it could be finger feeding, or it could be a bottle. But if you're still having to give milk other than just from the breast, we should be thinking about something other than a syringe, because there's a high risk of aspiration.
That could be a cup. So that's just it's got a tiny little lip on it, and that just rests on the baby's gum, and then you
want to
don't
show
tip
how to
it
do it?
in.
You've got your doll behind you, haven't you?
There's some marbles.
I'll have the marbles.
I'll lose those.
I'll put them
we
in the
won't
bag.
have them for next week, which would be a disaster, wouldn't it? So if you want to give your baby food in a cup, so an egg cup will do, or you can use a spoon, which has very similar way of doing it, but you just rest the little, if you've got one of these, and you can get them from the midwives on the ward, or your community midwives can get hold of them if you want them, but certainly on the ward you can get these, and you just literally rest it on your baby's lip. Hold your baby up but very close, and then you don't tip it into your baby. You mustn't tip. You just let the baby lap, so it comes onto rests onto the bottom gum and lip, and then they stick their tongue out and they lap the milk up.
It works so
it works
well.
really well, but term babies tend to be very messy with it. Premature babies are very good at cup feeding, but term babies tend to dribble and make a bit more of a mess. But it is a very effective way of giving volumes of milk, and they get into the rhythm of it very well. They use their tongue and they learn to put milk from the front to the back of their tongue and swallow, and they're in charge. But if you give it runny in a syringe, they're not sucking. And so it just pools in their mouth, and they can aspirate it, which is why we worry about it. It's not because we're just being awkward, it's the fact that they don't suckle and the tongue's not moving, so it doesn't move the milk from the front to the back before they swallow, and that can make babies, if they suddenly cry or breathe in, they can take it into their lungs. So it's just the safest way to give volume. So, but you can use a cup like that, or you can finger feed, which is using a tube, which is usually gets.
Shall I be on props again?
You can be on props again. There is one somewhere with a tube.
Near my place.
We've got about 4 bottles. I can see that.
Okay.
Yeah. So you can put that long tube. So you get these tubes from us. You can't buy these, and you put it onto your finger with some tape, and then you put the other end into a bottle. This is in a bottle with a teat on, so it doesn't, the tube doesn't fall out, and you put your milk in the bottle, and then you just pop that into your baby's mouth, same way as you'd give a bottle or whatever. You hold your baby close, pop that into your baby's mouth, and they suck it, and when they suck your finger, they suck up the milk like in a straw, and that's a really good way of giving, and it's not long term, it's for shorter term issues, just as you're establishing your feeding and getting, if you're a bit sore and you want to rest, instead of giving a bottle, you can do it. And babies do this very well as well. It's very effective.
And the advantage of doing this is that, firstly, it's not a bottle, so it's not plastic. It's a mum's finger or a dad's finger, or a partner's finger. But also, there's a delay because it takes time for the baby to draw the milk up from the bottle up the tube. So there's, like breastfeeding, there's a delay before the baby getting milk, so they don't expect a great big dollop of milk instantly when they go on, which is what happens with a bottle. So this gets them in, so keeps them expecting there to be a delay between sucking and getting the reward. And that's one of the issues that we have sometimes with babies that are bottle fed, is they are, Naomi describes it's flow driven, so they go on, they expect food and they expect it now, whereas with this is reiterating that actually it takes a moment or two before they get it, so that works quite well. So if you are in a situation where it's being suggested your baby is being topped up, then using a cup, using finger feeding are alternatives to bottles. And if your baby hasn't fed at birth, then it might be really beneficial not to be giving a bottle, because if your baby's fed at birth, they've had that priming feed, they know what your breasts are all about, they know what they're going to do, and they will normally cope. The babies that did not feed at birth have not had that priming feed, and it might be more challenging to get them back to the breast if we then start to introduce bottles. So it's thinking about alternative ways of giving milk. We've done a video about this, and that's on our series of videos which you can access via our website. So our page on the website is infant feeding. I've said this before, if you look at OUH, as in the hospital, maternity feeding, and then there's a link to our videos, and there is one about alternative feeding methods.
I think, the thing with giving bottles is it's not usually teach confusion, and as Alex already talked about, it nearly always is flow. When they've started to have bottles, it's all about the flow. And so it's very important that you understand that it's not putting the teat in the mouth that's the issue, it's normally the fact that the milk is instant. So it's getting back from that and maybe making babies recognise it. And that's why we talk a lot about protecting your milk supply, because if you don't, and they have bottles and then you put them back on the breast and the milk doesn't come freely because you've got a lower volume in your breasts, then they do get cross and they do start pulling and scratching at your breast because they are cross that they're not getting the flow that they used to. So if you are struggling with attachment, it's so important that you do lots and lots of stimulations so that you can protect your supplies for when your baby is going to feed at the breast, so that they go to the breast with a full amount of milk, and then they start to recognise that a breast is where the milk comes, and they learn to get a big mouthful. So it's all tied together, all of that, and it's all about protecting that. So going back to where we started in this bit of conversation, where you shouldn't really see us on the ward if you're normal, and if your baby is a day or two old and not attaching at the breast, be patient but protect your supply, because that is what it's all about, is making sure that you have got milk. So if you've got milk, you can do anything. You can work with attachment later, there's no time constraints, but when you have a baby, the clock starts ticking in milk production terms. So if you don't start doing that production on day 0, and we talk about this nearly every week, don't we? If you don't start doing early stimulation, day 0, day 1, day 2, where you're stimulating the breast 8 times a day, either by hand expressing or by breastfeeding, you will have a deficit of milk later. So the clock is ticking. You can sleep later. That's how we see it, because if you don't, you come to our clinic and you don't have enough milk to feed your baby, and babies are flow confused and they just fall asleep at the breast, and we get many comments about my baby's lazy, it doesn't feed, and babies aren't lazy, they're flow driven. So if the flow isn't there, they fall asleep, they just shut down because it's not what they're expecting.
It's a really good sign, isn't it, when you see a baby at the breast and their eyes are wide open, because they're getting milk.
They're engaged.
They're really getting on with it, and you see their jaw going and their eyes are wide open. And then as the time goes on, you see them, they start to start closing their eyes, do much less, and you're thinking, oh, they're not getting that flow now. We've had a couple of comments, and a comment and a question, so we'll cover these, and then you can chip in about any other things they've got going. So Charlotte's come back to see us again. It's lovely to see you again, Charlotte. She says, hi ladies, hope you're well and keeping safe. Sorry I haven't been able to watch the chats lately after she was getting her head around her miscarriage. I'm back, and Alicia is crawling now and getting bigger and funnier every day. So lovely. It's so nice to hear about her, and I hope you're okay and looking after yourself, Charlotte. It's a tough time, I know. Amy has said, hi ladies, I was told when readmitted into the JR on day 4 that I couldn't use the cup due to the risk of aspiration and had to give a bottle. Was this likely because of the jaundice? We're still on nipple shields at 3.5 months, and I'm wondering whether it's because we weren't. Oh, have I lost the rest of it? Amy, that's where the question ends. I don't know if there was more.
Well, I think it's unusual that your baby would aspirate if it was having a cup.
But if a baby's very jaundiced, it might be very
to coordinate its suck, swallow, breathe very well.
You do need an awake baby, don't you, to do cup feeding?
And the temptation, if your baby is sleepy, is to tip. You've got to have a very engaged baby when you're feeding. So if your baby's, not really engaged with you because it's so sleepy from the jaundice, it won't wake up and do the things that it needs to do, which is why, often they're given bottles because they just can't coordinate breastfeeding long enough to feed. They just won't open their mouths and attach at the breasts if they're really jaundiced, and it might be the same reason.
Finger feeding might have worked though.
Yeah, and sometimes mums use that as well and find it very effective. But generally once the jaundice is resolved, they tend to go back to feeding okay. But with nipple shields, that's they're not perfect, but they do mean that you've carried on and you're breastfeeding and you're giving your baby your milk at the breast, and you're actually having your baby suckling at the breast, so you're going to get the benefits and your baby's going to get the benefits of that. I think that you have to challenge them if you're wanting to get your baby off, and it's always worth trying that, and then just seeing what happens. But put the nipple shield on and then pull it off as soon as they start to get a really big glug and they start to swallow a lot, and then pull it off really quickly. I always say stick it on your breast above you quickly and put your baby on in the same breath. Sometimes they don't notice. The other thing that works really well.
Amy's just come back going, she pressed enter too soon. That's my trick. I normally do that. Typing one-handed, I'm very impressed. So that's quite a long question, one-handed.
The other thing you can do is make a sandwich with your fingers, and we don't recommend you do this routinely. No. But if you've had a nipple shield, if you make a sandwich, you see that, if you make a sandwich with your fingers and hold it and put your baby onto the breast with your fingers still attached, so that you keep that sandwich there, and just keep your fingers there and keep your fingers there and keep your fingers there until your baby realizes that it's firm. It's about the softness. They're not used to that softness. So if you make your breast really firm in their mouth, they think it's a nipple shield sometimes. So you can start them on it and then take the nipple shield off, make a sandwich and put your baby back onto the breast straight away when there's flow there, and they will hopefully keep going. And you just challenge it every now and then. You do it. Don't make it an issue. If they get cross, just put the nipple shields straight back on and carry on. You'll either forget your nipple shields and go out, and your baby will need feeding and they have to do it, and they will, or they will do it when they're ready, and you just have to keep challenging it. And maybe go in the bath or something with your baby, and or do it in a dream feed where they're not really conscious. They're sort of partially asleep. Wake your baby up before it's do a feed and try it that way, and sometimes that works. But you can attach them with a sandwich without using the nipple shield as well, and sometimes that works if they're having a bit of a dream feed. So you can get them off. I hope you manage, but don't panic, because they only do it when they're ready. They don't do it when you want them to.
You're not in charge on that one. They are.
And it doesn't matter if your baby's reaching its milestones. I know you don't want to have them, but it doesn't matter if you're feeding them and they're doing everything that they should. There aren't any rules in this one. So if your baby's doing okay, don't get stressed about it, because they're obviously not stressed. They're obviously doing really well, but they will come off them.
I think they're fiddly, aren't they? And people don't really like using them, but they definitely are a very useful tool, and we're very grateful for them. I mean, the idea of them originally was because of mothers being sore, and actually that's really just sticking plaster on a whack and grape wound, because that's not appropriate. That's dealing with the symptoms and not dealing with the cause. So from our point of view, the one time they are useful is for this, is for a baby that will not attach. It will not attach to the breast, and it becomes that bridge in a way to getting them to the breast, because it's so much better. Your baby's feeding from the breast with all the advantages that Naomi's mentioned, and it means you don't have to pump, and pumping long term is very, very demoralising, and mothers find that really hard work. So your baby's getting all the benefits, but sadly with a shield.
I think the only sort of addendum with that is if you've got low supply and you use a shield, you're going to get less milk into your baby. So your baby may not be happy if you haven't got lots of milk in your breast, because the flow is going to be quite slow, and also they will get less milk, so they won't get as much, but up to 30% less in a nipple shield. if you're using one. So just to be aware of that. So you have to have quite a good milk supply to sustain long-term feeding with the nipple shield.
And it's that whole thing about watching, for those milestones and watching for those boos and peas. We know, once that baby's got to be on day 4, we're wanting 2 yellow stools minimum every single day, and we're looking for 6 heavy wet nappies from day 6 every single day, and that is right up to the 6-week mark. At 6 weeks, some babies might poo slightly less often, that's quite normal too, but up to 6 weeks we're looking for 2 yellow stools daily and 6 heavy wet nappies, and that's a really good indicator.
I think the other thing to say is if you're using a nipple shield, the temptation is just to have your baby on the end of the nipple.
Yeah.
You see that against my dark uniform. So that your baby is pursing its lips like that when it's feeding, and you've got to do the same principles as breastfeeding. You've got to get a really wide open mouth and a really big mouthful onto the breast, and then you will make the next feed in the same way as your baby would if you didn't have the nipple shield on. But if your baby is feeding on the nipple like this, it's not going to stimulate you to keep producing enough milk. So you've got to just make sure that you teach your baby to open its mouth and go on. And to be honest, you're much more likely to get your baby off a nipple shield quickly if you've got a really big gape on a nipple shield, because it's the same when they come off. And if they feed like that and then you're trying to get them onto the breast,
it's
like
a different
that,
action, isn't it?
It's a different action. So you've got to make sure if you're using a nipple shield that you really encourage a deep latch and you're not doing lots of nipple feeding, because you will be sore if you take them off if they do that. So you've just got to make sure, and if you're not sure and you're under your midwives, ask your midwives to watch, or you can call us if you want to challenge your nipple shields. We can see you in our clinic if you're struggling, or La Leche or OBS, they're ideal for that sort of
Abingdon
support.
Baby Cafe.
Abingdon Baby Cafe, they're absolutely ideal for that sort of support, where it's more local to you hopefully, and they can watch your feeding, or just look at the attachment of the nipple shield to make sure it's okay. Hope that's helped.
So Charlotte's come back again and said, quick question, is it best to get checked after having her miscarriage? And Alicia was very cuddly when it happened. It was like she could tell something was up. So I think it's probably worth, sort of chatting with your GP and just find out what the norm is. I'm not sure whether people are checked as long as you're well these days, but your GP is your best person to have a chat with about that, Charlotte. And I think babies do pick up on how you're feeling. So, your baby,
very sensitive little beings, aren't they?
Absolutely, and you're their world. So, if you're feeling a bit low, I think Alicia did come out and give you a great big hug, and was lots of love. So I just want to make things better for you.
And I think that the add on to that with breastfeeding and things as well is that when you're very stressed and you're sore or you're very cross with your baby, which is often what happens in the middle of the night when it's not going right and your baby won't settle or it's crying a lot, the temptation is to hold your baby really tightly, and you forget that you're holding your baby. You're sore, you're going like this, you're sore with your attachment, and you're squeezing your baby a little bit, and they feel that. So I always say, think about your baby will feel everything that you're feeling through your hands. So if you're handling your baby and you're very tense, your hands are going to be tense as well. So just bear that in mind when you're with your baby, that they will pick up on that, and it will add to their stress as well. They will pick up on that cortisol, and they will pick up that you're tense, and they'll feel that in the way that you're handling them. So just be very aware when you're cuddling your baby and you're having a really bad day with them, because the truth is we all have bad days with our babies, that the way that you're picking your baby up and touching it is exactly what they feel. They know.
Particularly difficult at night, and that's when we were talking to mothers in our clinics about changing what you're doing, or sort of whatever's happening. I tend to say to mothers, keep the nights as simple as possible. If mothers are trying to get a baby back to the breast that hasn't been feeding particularly well at the breast, and they've been pumping, I'll say just carry on with the pumping at night, bottle feed at night, or whatever way they're feeding, and then work on the positioning and attachment and working on the feeding in the day, because we are all at a low ebb in the middle of the night. We don't function at our best at the middle of the night, and I know there will be some people out there who'll say actually feeding at night's much better for me, and it is for some, but if you're learning a new skill, middle of the night's not the best time really. So thinking about picking your time, like trying to get baby off a shield, it might be that it's during the day you try it, and at night you keep things simple.
You've got more oomph in you.
Yeah.
And I think also don't make decisions in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
And that's what early days breastfeeding is all about. People go out at 4 a.m. to Tesco's and buy a tin of formula, because that's they just can't do anymore, and they can't see past the soreness, and they can't see past the tiredness. And I always say make that decision at 8 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, and that
don't
goes back.
make the decision to.
That goes back to this picture that I was
Yeah.
showing you. You know, remember, babies need very small amounts. The night two. So you know, invariably, what happens is your baby is born. The first night, mum and baby sleep quite well. Second night, very often, baby is awake predominantly the whole night through. And certainly, when I was a ward midwife, I would always warn the parents and say, you know, tonight's going to be a nightmare. Your baby's going to grow horns. That's what we both say. Your baby's going to grow horns. They've been angelic all day. They've been gorgeous and they've slept. And you know, in the old days when grandparents would come and see them, they didn't even see their eyes open. Come the night, they've grown horns and they're awake all night. That is normal baby behaviour. And as long as your baby is healthy and term, and there are no risk factors, you are just going to go with it. And you're going to keep trying to breastfeed, and if it's not working, you're going to hand express, and you're going to get through that second night, and then you will be on to the winner. Because if you can get through that second night, things should then start to get better. But it's very often on that second night that many of our mothers waver.
I was just saying, you don't think it's normal, do you? I think that's the problem. And if you don't think it's normal, you worry.
They think they're starving their baby, but you've got to remember that their stomach is tiny and they really, really do not need big volumes of food. What they're looking for is a lot of comfort, i.e. being skin to skin with you, but by then mums are very tired and what they want to do is sleep, but the baby just wants to be with the mother.
They're chasing the milk.
Yeah.
So they're chasing it. So, you know, bingo, the next day you've got nice, warm, full breasts.
Yeah.
And suddenly they're, you know, day 4 they're awash with milk, and day 5 their eyes are popping out. There's so much, you know. But you'd never believe that. And we do get lots of calls from women that are on day 3 and they just think they're sore and the baby's been really sucking a lot. And, you know, you follow it up a week later and they say, oh, it's all fine now, it's all fine now. But in that 24-hour period, it feels like a lifetime.
So come in with a positive attitude, you know, on that second night.
And expect it to be normal.
Yeah, whether it's here or whether you're at home. You know, that second night will be challenging, but just go into it thinking, I'm just going to go with it, things will get better, and they will.
And actually we know that all the research that's been done on sleep is that mothers that breastfeed get longer sleep, 45 minutes longer a night than a mum that gives just bottles. So you know, you might not believe that as a breastfeeding mum, but actually you're resting much more and you don't have to get up and prepare things. So you know, you do get more sleep by research than if you're giving bottles, if you're breastfeeding. So, you know, keep that in your head when you're struggling, because we've all been there, you know, and this is our world. We know what it's like. So trust your body, trust yourself, trust your baby.
And we're still ensconced in that world, whilst both our children are in their 20s.
Our babies never grow up.
Yeah.
36 my babies are now.
So, you know, our babies have grown up, but actually we're so in this world that actually we've not forgotten what it's like to be a newborn mum. You know, because we've not really moved on. We've stayed in this world. So we do know, much as my children are old enough to have their own children, I do remember what it's like, and I do know what it's like. But we're here to say there is light at the end of the tunnel, and keep going.
And to trust your body. You know, you've grown a baby, you can feed a baby.
Charlotte's just come back and said, thank you both for your support throughout and also the emails to me. I hope I'm being a good mum to Alicia. You're being a fabulous mum to her. Amy has said, thanks both. We've had lots of help already. We came to see you. I know, I recognised your name. Plus sessions with OBS. I was just curious why we were told no cup, as I asked for one after seeing these videos. It must have been due to the jaundice then. Thanks for the info. And that is probably the most likely reason. Because, you know, if we've got a sleepy baby, and babies who are jaundiced are more than likely sleepy, we can't rely on them to remove that milk well. There is a huge risk that they will just inhale it, and that's not what we want.
And also you have to keep them under the lights for as long as you can in the time that they're under it. So if you spend hours and hours trying to feed them, they miss out on the phototherapy that they're needing to have to get them out of the light so you can go back to normal and feeding. So it's very distressing actually for mothers that have to come back in with jaundiced babies. You know, it's probably one of the more distressing things because it happens so much. But, you know, your world sort of collapses when you have to come back in and leave your family behind again, and your babies aren't waking up, and you know, they may have lost a bit of weight as well, because those things go hand in hand, or your baby might have been a bit small or premature, and you know, it is something that's quite common in small and slightly earlier babies. So under 37 weeks they tend to be more likely to get jaundice because their livers are much more immature. So, you know, it's a very normal thing for us to see, but your world has fallen apart when that happens. And I think you just want to go back to feeding them and doing all the things that you have to do. But actually, the less time you spend feeding and keeping them out of the lights, the more time under the lights they recover and you get home more quickly.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
it's that fine balance between getting the feeding and having the opportunity to feed when your baby's so sleepy and you can't wake them up to feed, versus keeping them under the lights for them to get better. And that's the tricky bit, and that's the bit that distresses mums more than anything.
Yeah.
So, you know, we hear what you're saying with that. It's really frustrating. Sounds like you did brilliantly.
Yeah. So I'm not sure where all the rest of these questions are. So we have lots of questions by now. So thankfully I had this lovely lady in clinic who gave us a few ideas of what she wanted us to cover. So we've talked about milk volumes and offering different methods of offering. So once we've got to transitional mature milk, not using a syringe. She mentioned that she didn't think she'd need a pump. So she hadn't bought one, which is fair enough, and we don't expect you to go out and buy a pump because we hope you'll never need one. But she said that maybe people should have it in the back of their minds that they might need a pump. So the times that when you may need a pump is if you've got, for instance, like a jaundice baby that's struggling because they're very sleepy. If you've got a baby that's not gaining appropriately or not attaching, then those are the times when you would be thinking about pumping. And I mean, the wonderful thing these days is that with Amazon Prime, and I don't really want to line Jeff Bezos' pocket, but actually it means you can have a pump the next day.
Sometimes the same day.
Is that, yes? And I mean, and all the community teams do have a few pumps. They don't have loads, so it's not an inexhaustible supply.
It's one in, one out usually.
Yeah. So and mums who borrow a pump from the community midwives might only get it for a week or 2 weeks, and that's fair really, because that gives people time to buy their own if they need it. But it's, you know, it is quite easy to access a pump these days. And when you're thinking about a pump, it's what are you using it for? If it's for the occasional use, then maybe a hand pump's perfect for you. But if you're doing it because you're trying to push your supply or the baby's not attaching, then we would be recommending a double pump. It doesn't have to be a hospital grade one. And when I queried our pump agent about it, because we use a number of different brands, but one of the brands I queried her and I said, well, what is the difference between a domestic pump that you sell on Amazon and the pumps we have in the hospital? The difference is only that our pumps in the hospital are longer lasting. So the likelihood is a domestic pump is going to get used a few times a day over a period of 2 years maybe, whereas one of our hospital pumps is going to be in constant use for years and years.
Yeah.
So they are built to last, whereas the ones that you can buy online and from the manufacturers are much more aimed at the domestic market, and it makes them more affordable. So
yeah, the big ones that you use and see on the wards are about £2,000.
Yeah.
So that's the difference. You know, it's 10 times more.
So, for instance, with Amida and Ardo, which are two makes of hospital grade pumps, you can get their pumps for in the region of £100, and that's a double pump, and they work really, really well. So, you know, there are pumps that you can access at a good price that that work brilliantly, really brilliantly.
And you can hire the hospital grade ones for about a month. I think it's about £50 usually, and they deliver if you ring. Or order it before a certain time.
3 normally, isn't it? 3 in the afternoon.
It can be delivered within 24 hours, so you'll get it delivered the next day. And so if you've got a pump in the hospital that you're using and you want to hire the same pump at home, take all the kits home with you as well, because the chances are that the pump that you get that you hire from the hospital from the company will send you smaller funnels. It'll be a 24 size funnel.
We've done that. Yeah, I've done that this morning with somebody actually, and we're talking about funnels, we're talking about this, and we're talking about this.
Bigger, that's a 27,
exactly, this is a nice big one. We're talking about the hole that you can see there. So this morning I've just managed to get some slightly larger sized ones.
And they go from about 20, well some that you can get 16, but I don't think I've ever used a 16.
Well, we've got 21s on the wards, and they're not suitable for majority of people.
24 is the standard size for a pump when you buy one. And if you get something like the Bella Baby, which is a brilliant little pump for about £40 on Amazon, it's made in China. It's all digital. It's a double pump, but it only does 24s.
Yeah.
So if you've got bigger nipples,
don't buy it.
Don't buy it because it won't work for you. You know, you can't get bigger funnels for it. It doesn't. You know, it's not that expensive that you can. So you will get one, and you'll find that the funnels are uncomfortable, but you can't get bigger ones. So be sure, particularly if you used a pump in the hospital, make sure you know what size your funnel is. So the ones that we use are either usually 27 or 30s, because we find that most of those fit women more comfortably. You can get up to 36s, but most women don't need a funnel that big. Most people are a 27, 24, 27 or 30. And if you're comfy with a 24 pump, and I think some of them are 24s in the kits we've got, and you're fine with that, then you'll be fine with one of the cheaper pumps and it will be good for you. But if you have got slightly larger nipples and you need a larger funnel, then you need to spend a little bit more on a pump, or borrow a pump that's got larger access to larger funnels. But if you've got them in the hospital, take them home with you, because we throw them out. They're disposable, and so the community midwives, I think, recycle theirs. And have them sterilised in our sterile services and get repacked. But the ones on the ward are used once, so take them with you, because if you get the same make of pump, the funnels are probably going to fit you with the funnel that you get and the pump you buy, and then you might have a choice of different size funnels to try. And otherwise you have to order more, and they're not cheap.
No,
I think they're about £12 each or something, aren't they?
Yeah.
So,
and for instance, if you buy an Amida or an Arde pump, then actually the pump kits you get from here, you just take the pump kit home, and you can buy the single pump if you were to buy them, and because you've got 2 kits already, so you'll actually have 3 kits, because the pump will come with a single kit. You don't need any more than that, because you'll have the 2 that you've got from home and a spare. And the only difference between, when you buy, for instance, the Arde Calypso, the only difference between the double pump and the single pump is that it comes with 1 kit or 2. So the pump is exactly the same. You're just paying the extra for the extra kit. So if you've got the kits from here, you don't need to worry about it.
So, have a little think and look at what you get, because, the stuff you've got is great, that you can take home with you. And same with the bottles, because they all get thrown out, don't they?
Yeah,
they
do. I always tell
bottles.
I always tell mums, take them all home, and even if you just want to use them to make a vinaigrette,
or freeze, freeze your milk in.
Yeah.
They're great little sizes to freeze if you're just, collecting milk.
I've got loads in my drawers at home, because I use them for making sauces, because they're brilliant.
So don't leave them behind if you want them, because they will get thrown away as soon as you go, and that's such a waste. Reuse everything if you can.
So that was about pumps then. So thinking that you don't have to buy a pump in advance, and it also really depends what you're doing. Whether it's horses for courses with pumps. A little manual pump would be brilliant for the occasional pumping. You're trying to get your supply up, baby's not attaching. You probably do need a double electric, and they don't have to break the bank. And then if you're feeling like you want someone to splash out on you, there's always something like the LV that fits in the bra. But they are a lot of money.
I mean, when we had our babies 30 years ago, there wasn't electric pumps available. It was an absolute luxury.
Yeah.
It's like air conditioning in cars. We didn't have that either, and it's things have moved on so much that the expectation is everybody has an electric pump. But actually,
you don't have to.
I just had a hand.
Yep,
pump.
I had a hand pump too.
And I used to get loads out with it. So don't feel obliged to buy one. You could, see how you get on with a hand pump first. The other thing to say is, if you're looking at Hackers as a breast pump, somebody said, I've got a breast pump the other day to me, and I always ask what it is, and they said, I've got a Hacker. That's not a breast pump. It's a breast reliever. So it just takes the fullness out of your breast and drip breast milk. It's not a pump. No. So it won't do for milk production if you're having to feed your baby without breastfeeding. If you're just wanting to collect the odd bit of milk, it's great. Yeah. If you're really full and you want to just take the fullness out of your areola and your nipple area, they're great. If you have got inverted nipples and things like that, they pull your nipples out a little bit, they're great, but they won't sustain milk production if you have got more issues than that.
And to bear in mind that the milk that you're getting is drip milk, so because it's drip milk, it tends to be slightly lower in fat. It's fabulous because it's high in sugar and it's high in water-soluble vitamins, so it is absolutely fabulous. But if you give that to your baby as a feed, the likelihood is they'll come back sooner looking for more food, because they got all the salad and they didn't get any lasagna, because they haven't got the fattier part of the feed, because that's when you're using a pump or the baby's at the breast. When you're doing it's draining the breast, it's getting the high fat milk as well as the lower fat milk, whereas this is the milk that you tend to leak is the lower fat milk. So if you're going to go and leave a bottle of that milk with somebody else to feed your baby, then the likelihood is you might be coming back sooner than you'd expected. So
and you could always mix the two up, so that you mix some of the drip breast milk from the hacker into the express breast milk and mix it up, so that there's a mix of milk there as well, and that will do just as well. But you know, it's great, it's absolutely brilliant, and mums do find that they increase their milk production a little bit when they use them. And but remember also, if you're breastfeeding one side and you put it on the other side, if your baby needs more food, it's in the hacker, it's not in your breast. And so, you know, we don't recommend that you use it if you need to feed both sides. You'll empty your breast before your baby gets to it, and you might find that they don't have enough to feed on if you've taken 60 mils off in a hacker of drip breast milk. You know, they will get some fat at the breast, but they won't get the bigger drink if they need it. So just be aware of when you use it, if you normally feed on both breasts and you're finding that your baby's not settling because you're feeding on both breasts and you've used the hacker, and then you're pouring the milk back into your baby's tummy, which it could have had from the breast. You know, it's a long way around of doing it. So just be aware that you put it on after you finish feeding if you're going to breastfeed both sides.
Right, so Charlotte's just come back. She said this weekend we're taking Alicia swimming and having family time together in Banbury, and also looking around the shops. Lovely, that'll be great. Enjoy your time. Oh, it's be really sweet. Now I'm hoping I'm going to say your name right. I'm going to say Mina. It's M-I-N-E, so I'm not quite sure how you say your name, so apologies if I've said it wrong. But she's 38 weeks and she's got a couple of questions because she wants to breastfeed. She's always heard about responsive feeding, but in the early days, if my baby doesn't wake up asking for it in the night, how often should I wake them up, or should I? And this is exactly a question that's the first of her two questions. That's a question I've just had with a couple on the corridor. They came up and had a chat with me, and they were saying their baby was born yesterday, and did they need to feed the baby again? So if your baby is born term, so 37 plus weeks, and they're a good weight and there are no risk factors, then we anticipate your baby might only feed 3 times in the first 24 hours. And then in the second 24 hours, that may only be 5 times. But after that, we'd expect your baby to feed a minimum of 8 times in 24 hours. So it's a bit of a sort of slow build up, really, because they don't have a huge need of food in those first few days. They need that protection that colostrum provides. Those internal organs have got to get used to processing food, which they've never done before. So it's a bit of a slow build up.
Laxative, it gets rid of meconium.
And that will get them to start waking up. Once they've got food going in them, they start to rouse, they're going to poo out that meconium, they're going to start getting that concept of being hungry and start looking for food. But it very much depends what the situation is. So if your baby is, you know, if there any risk factors with your baby, then we're going to be putting in a 3-hourly feeding regime. And when we say 3-hourly, we mean a minimum of 3 hours. So if your baby is born a bit early, if they're a bit lighter than we'd like them to be, you know, if there's any concerns about them, if maybe you know, it wasn't a brilliant birth and they've used a lot of their reserves up, if you happen to have diabetes, what have I forgotten? What else is there?
Jaundice.
Yeah, jaundice babies. So all these risk factors means that actually we would be...
Infection, if your baby's got sepsis.
Yeah, so
or antibiotics.
You know, if you've had to have antibiotics through labour because you've had your waters went, we might be looking at your baby a little bit more carefully because we'd be worried about whether maybe your baby might get an infection. So all these things might say to us then, okay, right, we'll put a feeding plan in place. And in that instance, we'd be talking about minimum 3 hourly, so feeding, making sure they don't go more than 3 hours. But as long as your baby is well and term and a good weight, then responsive feeding is definitely the way we would be going, and we just follow the baby.
But they won't do it if they're in a cot.
No, so keep them skin to skin. And this is what I've just said to the couple I met on the corridor. I said, put your baby skin to skin, because it was all wrapped up in a cot.
Responsive.
And I said, because then your baby is more likely to rouse and look for feeds.
It's where it expects to be.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's really important that you do that, because, you know, many mums ring and say, my baby hasn't woken up for a feed, but they're nowhere near their mums, you know. And they're hot, they're exhausted like you are after you've given birth, and they're very happily in their little bubble by a radiator in the very warm ward, and you know, you need to undress them, and skin to skin is you taking your top off, your baby taking its clothes off down to its nappy, and wrapping yourself up in a blanket, you know, so that you're covered up but your baby is next to your skin.
Or inside your dressing gown.
Yeah, and under your t-shirt, whatever, and that will then make them play out their cues, and that's much more responsive than anything else. But the other thing to say about that is if you are only feeding your baby 3 times in 24 hours, which is absolutely fine, you could be on your, on it by hand expressing.
Yeah. And that's what I said to this couple. I said she
Don't
can carry on.
She
She can carry on expressing, and actually you can feed a sleeping
Keep
baby.
pouring it into your baby.
Yeah, I said she had 0.9. She said to me, "I've got 0.9." I said, "Well,
that's almost a full syringe, isn't it?"
That we're talking about.
That's loads in the first day. We wouldn't expect most mums to have that.
We're talking about this much.
That's so much.
You see right up to here.
We
so
normally
that's
expect 0.1 or 0.2
so
in the early days.
She's doing really, really well.
Yeah.
And I said, well, go and give it and then hand express again. And your baby, the more you do that, the more your
They
baby's going
probably
to
won't
wake
wake
up.
if they get 0.9, because actually that's almost filling that little tiny marble that we've just shown you.
Yeah.
With the mucus and everything else, it all will be good. So, just really keep on with that stimulation, because your baby will just, if you put it in their mouth, it coats their tongue when it's thick colostrum, and they just absorb it and swallow a little bit slowly, and then that just keeps them well fed, but you're stimulating the breast to make milk, and so by day 5, when your baby's really waiting for all that lovely milk, it will be there. But if you don't do very much, you're giving message, don't stimulate very much, it's going to be slower to come in, particularly if you've had more of the risk factors. So you've had a cesarean where your skin to skin is going to be reduced, or you've had your baby separated from you for any time at all, or you've had forceps delivery, or you've had to have something done to you. Maybe you lost a little bit more blood, or they had to do more stitching for you, or your placenta didn't come out straight away, and they've had to take you into theatre to deliver your placenta. All of those things will reduce the time of skin to skin that you can have in the early hours, and so you've got to catch up with that. And if you've had a cesarean, absolutely you should be hand expressing. You should be on it 8 times a day, even if your baby's only feeding 3.
Yeah, and even if you've got colostrum at home,
really,
and if you did it in advance, you still need to be doing it. Because we say that every time. It's what you do after you have your baby that has an impact on your supply. Anything you do before, that's a great skill to have, to learn how to hand express. But any colostrum you collect, unless your baby is, unless you have diabetes, that's a bonus.
We did a lot about this last week. So if you want to listen in at the beginning of the last session,
we talked a lot about it.
In fact, it was a real colostrum harvesting theme last week. So we spent a lot of time doing that. So, even if you only listen to the first little bit of last week's session, it's on YouTube, OMVP on YouTube. You'll hear our session from last week about colostrum harvesting, how to do it, how to hand express again. So you can sort of tune into that and see that again if you want to know a little bit more. But you can't know that skill enough. It just is such an important thing to do in the early days of your baby's life. And that first hour or 2 determines your baby's health for the rest of its life. So when it's 75, you've determined its weight, its diabetes, heart disease, cancer. The breast colostrum protects your baby for that. All of those things when it's grown up in 75. So it can't be underestimated, that bacterial transference, the skin to skin, the baby getting used to the flora on your body and colonizing its own body to protect it, the microbiome in your baby's gut, all of those things are in colostrum, and the viral components of your colostrum give your baby the immunity and protect it from things like diabetes and infections. So really important that you understand that and give that baby a chance to have those early stimulations. And if you don't do it in the first hour, do it as soon as you can, and that's great. Just within the first few hours is brilliant. So if it has gone a little bit pear-shaped at the end of your birth, then make up for it. You can do lots and lots and lots of skin to skin after that, and that will do. But really be on that stimulation. So if you've had a bit of a delay and your baby hasn't fed really early on, you have to really chase it and do lots and lots of breastfeeding, or lots and lots of hand expressing, or a bit of both, to chase that stimulation to get that milk in. And we know that most babies that come back into hospital with weight loss have normally had a cesarean or had an instrumental delivery, and they are also usually jaundiced because they're dehydrated if they're not getting enough food. So we know that breast milk makes babies less jaundice. Removing colostrum in the first sort of 48, colostrum meconium in the first 48 hours stops babies from getting jaundice. So the more colostrum they get, the more they poo out that meconium, the less jaundice your baby will be. So it's all intertwined.
Yeah.
It's all one thing makes another thing.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
so there's a reason why we say it. It's really important that we do it, and we can't say it enough. And the clock's ticking. You can't turn the clock back. So you've really got to work at it and do what you can when you can, as soon as you can, and that will give you payback at 2 weeks.
Right, we're going to go on to the second question now.
Lovely.
It said, if the dad wants to be involved in feeding, I believe we need to make sure breastfeeding is well established before they can use a bottle of express milk to contribute. But what is the time frame we should consider to start doing this? So that is like, how long is a piece of string? Because every baby's different, isn't it? So
there aren't any rules. You make the rules as parents.
It's interesting though, because as many people will know if they've watched this before, I come from an NCT background, and in NCT we always said to wait till sort of 6 weeks or so.
Yeah.
The only thing is that I think Naomi and I would both say that we've met babies at 6 weeks that you've tried to give a bottle to, who've never had a bottle before, and they're like, whoa, no way.
They definitely won't. Yeah.
No way. Do I want this bottle? So it's a bit of a difficult situation. The rationale behind not starting expressing before 6 weeks is because the idea is that your baby's going to just stimulate the supply that you need, because at 6 to 8 weeks the supply that your baby needs is pretty much established, and if you have too much, then it's come down again. But we know from experience that many babies, if you wait to 6 weeks, you will really struggle to get them to take a bottle. So it might be, it might be worth trying sooner than that.
Do it once a week or something.
Yeah, just
don't do them frequently, but just once a week. Try it and see how you get on.
And often, if it's babies will cope. So early on, babies will cope quite well. Later on, you might want to use your partner to do it. You might not want to be there if they're getting upset. We meet mothers whose babies have to have a bottle for one reason or another. Maybe they're having to come in and the baby's not coming with them, and that can be really challenging if they've not had a bottle before. If there's no need to give a bottle, then partners can do all sorts of other things and not feed. So
it's very difficult, because some babies you'll give one bottle and they won't go to the breast again. And that
but
does occasionally
often,
happen, just occasionally, and you don't know which baby that's going to be. So just be aware that it can create confusion with some babies. Not very many, but it does happen occasionally. And most babies don't care what goes in their mouth, but they do feed very differently from a bottle. So it takes them a while to do it, and it will go round and round and round their mouth.
You'll see the tongues a bit like, well, I'm not sure what to do here.
Because it's a very different way of feeding, so they will mess about with it for a while before they get it.
But the sheer nature of the people that we meet in clinic are the people that are having problems with feeding, and many of our babies will be on a bottle, and actually most babies do cope. So
and most babies don't. They will go back to the breast, and they don't seem to mind. So it is your choice, and it's what works for you as a family. Just the same as mixed feeding and all the other things that mums choose to do. It's what works for you as a family, and there isn't a right answer or a wrong answer. You make all the rules in your family, and your baby will thrive on being loved and cared for, as well as being fed. So don't do things that you feel you ought to do because people are judging you, because the only people that should be involved in the decisions is you, and it doesn't matter what anyone else thinks or says. So trust what's right for you, and when it's right for you, and just make sure if you do introduce a bottle that you pump. Yeah. If you're wanting to maintain your supply.
That's what she's saying. So
just make sure you don't.
So when that bottle's given, you want to be removing milk around that time. So
for instance, if you choose to give bottles at night instead of breastfeeding, you will find that that's 50% of the day. Your milk will drop down if you don't do breastfeeding as well at night. So if you feel that you want to just bottle feed by your partner and you sleep, you've still got to pump if you want to maintain lactation, because your supply will drop. So it's understanding things like that the consequences of introducing a bottle means that it does take away the stimulation of your breast milk, and that will very quickly pick up on that, and it will stop production, and your supply will go down if it's something that you do. if that's what you want and it works out for you, then that's fine. But you've got to be aware that introducing a bottle and giving that will affect your supply.
I think Mina's very much the way this is written.
Yeah.
I'm getting the impression it's the occasional bottle.
Yeah, this is for everybody that's thinking about
absolutely.
it. You know, that you've just got to be aware of that it does alter your supply.
And apparently, I said I said her name right. So, good. I'm glad. Charlotte's just come back and said she can't believe Alicia's 17 months. Where's it gone? Where's that time gone? I know, it's amazing. Evelyn has said, hi, little one's 19 days old today, exclusively breastfed. He seems to be spitting up a lot more than in previous days. Cannot seem to get him to burp. Is this normal? Well, breastfeeding is not an act that,
windy thing.
No, it's not windy because you don't have air in your breast. So if he's bringing it up, it's probably just because he's, you know, I always say this, they've got a fairly immature sphincter valve at the top of their stomach, so they do bring a bit up. That's, you know, that's why we have all these muslin cloths and everything. You know, it's completely normal for babies to bring some up, and it might just be that your baby's just taking a little bit more on board than they need, and they're bringing it back up again. Yeah,
they may have got better at breastfeeding.
Yeah, so they're just taking that bit more.
Your supply is getting more established. You know, you're just over 2 weeks, and that's when you start to, you know, take over milk production up to 6 weeks. So you know, it's the early days, and then as they get better at it, which is, you know, new dance partner, you get better as you practice, then your milk supply goes up. So as long as they're doing everything they should be doing, peeing and pooing normally, and their weight's been all right so far, and generally they're well, then it's probably because they're getting more milk.
Yeah.
And a little bit of posting is always normal for a baby, especially if you tip them up. You know, if you change their nappy after a feed, it'll just come out their mouth because they haven't got that valve that stops it, like we have as adults. So you know, if you just turn them upside down, it'll just come out their mouth. And if there is a bit of wind below it, if they do a little bit, whatever's above it will come up.
Yeah,
and that's normal.
So thinking that, you know, there isn't a windy, you know, stimulating exercise breastfeeding because there is no air in your breasts, and that most babies will bring a bit up. It's only a concern if your baby's bringing up whole feeds at a time regularly and it's affecting weight gain. That's when we do get worried. But babies being a bit sick, we're not terrifically worried about. So Evelyn, hopefully things, you know, will just continue to be wonderful.
How fantastic.
We've got a message from Jane Joyce. Hello, Jane.
Hello, Jane.
She says, lovely to see you both. You've changed rooms since I last tuned in.
No, we like to move around.
Yeah. we're often in different rooms. We've done this room quite a lot, actually. Because we now have an office.
Sofas.
Yeah, we've got an office on level. We're now based on level 7, so we tend to use a room on level 7 now. So anyway, she says, Naomi, that enormous boob by your shoulder is very impressive. Thank you so much to all our fab maternity infant feeding team midwives for all your brilliant work. From all of us at Oxfordshire Breastfeeding Support and the Leche League.
Ditto back to you.
Yeah,
all.
Absolutely. I mean, I think
what a team we've got in Oxfordshire.
Yeah, I think the women of Oxfordshire are very lucky to have such wonderful support. You know, hopefully here and out in the community. So, you know, if anybody doesn't know, but we work very closely with OBS and La Leche and Abingdon Baby Cafe and the health visitors. So we sort of
talk to each other.
Yeah, we do all talk to each other. In fact, we have quarterly meetings where we sort of talk about good practice and improve. Yeah, exactly. Join the dots and improve what we're doing and make sure that the parents, you know, that we are giving a consistent service. So Fian has come on and said, hi, sorry I'm late to join.
Welcome.
So right, no problem, Fian. I've got to phone her later as well, so that's my reminder.
Yeah.
Laurie Betty's come on. We haven't heard from you for a bit. Hi ladies, so nice to see you again online. My baby girl is 10 months old.
Never.
We all have coronavirus and baby is not so keen on solids. I remember food under 1 is just for fun, and this gives me reassurance. Family pressure is enormous and they don't support me in this. Rather, they call me irresponsible when not forcing my baby solids and breastfeeding more often. Can you please reassure me? We'll definitely reassure you. And if you've all got coronavirus at the moment, then actually your baby's not going to be very hungry. And the best thing you can be giving them is that fantastic breast milk that is totally full of all those antibodies as well. Yeah, absolutely. Who's hungry when they're ill? No, you're not. So keeping her fluids up, you know, feeding your baby.
Your supply
absolutely. You know, she does not need lots of food at this point in time. You know, babies that get admitted to our children's wards are not on big amounts of food. You know, as long as you're getting food into her.
Look at the wheeze and poos.
Yeah, just
make sure they're peeing okay.
Yeah, I remember supporting someone whose baby, when we were allowed to support babies of all ages, and the baby was 18 months and was in for a week, and that baby was constantly breastfed throughout that time, and had been eating a full diet, 3 meals a day plus, and a bit of breast milk, and this baby went totally onto breast milk, and was fine, absolutely fine. That baby coped. So Laurie Betty, you are doing the best thing you can for your baby, and yes, we totally reassure you.
It's what we're seeing is people in the community with COVID again. It's really, really creeping up. Really, really creeping up. And we're very lucky that it's not coming into the hospitals a lot, but we are seeing mums with COVID asymptomatic and very, very symptomatic and very, very poorly pregnant. So, think about your immunisation, think about your vaccinations. It's really supporting everybody in the community because I think it's a question of if you get it, it's when you get it now, because it is so rampant. So, protect everybody and protect your family. Give your breast milk to your babies, because that will give lots and lots of antibodies to your babies to protect your babies if you've been vaccinated. So, it's really important that you protect yourselves, particularly if you're pregnant, because you have much less lung capacity when you're later on in your pregnancy. So your reserves for chest problems is much smaller, and that's what we're seeing with mums coming into hospital. They're very, very, very poorly. So mums are coming in without symptoms, but and are okay. But they're going to be giving their babies antibodies. If you've had COVID, your babies will get the antibodies from your breast milk, and if you had the vaccination in pregnancy, they will have some antibodies through the umbilical cord, through the placenta, and also if you're breastfeeding, they will get it through your breast milk as well. So keep everybody safe, and think about that vaccination.
So Laurie Betty, I think we just
good luck to getting better.
Keep going feeding. Just encourage your baby to feed, and it keeps the fluids up. And your remember, your breast milk's always modulating itself. It's always changing. So your body knows that you're all suffering with coronavirus. It will be compensating for your baby. You'll probably come out of it with a bigger supply than when you went into it, and that's absolutely fine. And that will sort itself out again. So. Right, I think this is our last comment. This is from Charlotte. Ladies, you're the best, and I'm so proud of you all, including the Chipping Norton midwives and the JR. After the miscarriages, I've lost a lot of weight. Alicia loves her milk, juice, water and smoothies. Brilliant, Charlotte. Keep going, and hope things will be better for you going forward. I think we're going to say goodbye now. We've hit the 3:30 mark. I think we've got some
first time.
Yeah,
finish on time. We don't do that very often.
A few minutes afterwards. So
we've had some great questions.
Yeah, all the best to all of you.
Thank you so much for watching us. Spread the word.
Yeah, those that have already had their babies and those that haven't, and lovely to see some old favourites back, some lovely people that we've met before. So
don't underestimate what you're doing as mums.
Yeah,
I've said it several times this week, but you have a superpower.
Yeah,
feeding your baby is a superpower.
It is.
So
yeah, absolutely, very
going.
Yeah, brilliant. Anyway, thank you very much, and we'll see you
next week. I think, isn't it?
Yeah. Save up your questions ready for us.
We'd love to see you again.
Bye.
Bye from us.